In a recent government's meeting, Councillor Paul Dundas wanted some clarity on the rules for councillors regarding social media and their code of conduct.
I think 90% of the difficulty in arguments over code of conduct complaints is confusion over to what degree somebody's acting in the capacity as a councillor, particularly on social media.
I always take the view that if I'm commenting on anything publicly, I'm wearing my hat as a councillor, so I have to be mindful of the code of conduct when I do so.
Well, it is rather a shame, Councillor Pearson, that other councillors do not share your professionalism.
Does it relate to comments on social media? Yes, it does. If you say anything on social media and you say it in your capacity as a councillor, or give the impression that you are acting in your capacity as a councillor, then it will be caught, potentially, by the code of conduct.
So if a councillor had councillor written on a social media profile and he chaired a meeting in which he then went on social media to discuss the people that attended that meeting that he chaired, would that fall into this category, do you think? Sounds like it would. Yet it didn't, did it, when that actually happened with Councillor Lee Scordis. So according to Councillor Scordis, the people interrupting were anti-vaxxers, conspiracy cranks. They do not speak for ordinary people. Let me play you a clip of what we were actually talking about.
Are you going to do a congestion charge around here and all? Does it lead to that? That if we don't have people out of their cars, you're going to tax us out of the cars?
Yes, we're not against people walking and cycling more. It's the fact it's being pushed into it. Now, what was the demographic? What age group were you surveying?
Some really good questions, hopefully given a bit of clarity. As I say, members of the council now will discuss it.
So as you can see, we were talking about bicycle lanes. Not vaccines, no one mentioned it. So here was my response, and I let him know that he was violating his code of conduct, and if it didn't cease immediately, we'd put in a formal complaint. So I gave him an opportunity to wind his neck in. Yeah, he didn't take that opportunity. And I clarified that vaccines were irrelevant because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the pollution from lithium mines. Because the council know how flawed their plan is to get everyone on a bicycle in hilly Colchester, so they think that supplying a gazillion electric bikes and scooters will solve that problem. Meanwhile, they don't care about the masses of environmental damage that will be done for mining lithium, not to mention the child slave labour for the cobalt. Several other people did tell him to wind his neck in, but no, these were literal anti-vaxxers and climate change deniers who believed we were bringing in mind control. OK, I did miss the first half an hour of the evening, but nobody, I know, thinks that Colchester Council are capable of mind control, let alone have the infrastructure to implement it. So I can't imagine that statement is true. But that didn't stop him. And then Jesus stepped in to ask the councillor, why did you hang up on me when I asked you why you think it's OK to call people cranks when people have mental health issues and using derogatory words such as this propagates stigma? Are you not the mighty Labour Party of tolerance? Eagerly awaiting your reply. Colchester Views asked Councillor Scordis, correct your narrative, Lee, please. I'm not supporting anyone. People have different views and ideas. You're also better than name-calling. No, he's not. You don't agree, that's fine. But because you don't, it doesn't make you superior and righteous. Be better. Clues in the name. Councillor Lee Scordis says, frankly, I believe no one should be promoting these dangerous views of cranks who manipulate vulnerable people, especially when they have links to the far right. It's irresponsible and doesn't help your case. So, considering it was my face on the video, as you can imagine, I wasn't terribly happy to be quoted as being dangerous views of cranks who manipulate vulnerable people. Please provide the evidence. I would love to see what you can come up with. Now, in my defence, I will admit to having been out the country for 10 years. And I didn't know that if one went to one's local council to question them about the wisdom of spending millions on cycle lanes that don't actually connect throughout the city, and the wisdom of trying to get people who don't want to be on a bike, I didn't know that was dangerous or far right. Nobody told me. On day 3 of the abusive tweets, Councillor Scordis decided he would ditch his anti-vaxxer stance and switch to calling us all homophobic, after some parents expressed concerns over the drag queen story hour to be held at Colchester Library. Instead of taking the opportunity to put everyone's mind at rest as to the content of this performance, no, he decided to brand us all as homophobic and far right. To be clear, none of these local residents had anything against drag queens. What they were concerned about is having adult content shown to children, especially as they were aware of multiple times when drag acts had been convicted paedophiles and part of grooming rings. This is not my area of expertise, so I have no idea if these were real drag acts or whether they were just people posing for purposes of grooming. So I didn't involve myself in any of this. I have no idea what went on at Colchester Library, but I do understand the concerns of the parents who were worried, and some of the people in that group are gay themselves, so they're hardly going to be homophobic. And having since seen some of the photographs from some of these drag queen story hours, none of which, I hasten to add, happened in Colchester, but having seen photographs which I cannot put in this video because it would be a violation of YouTube guidelines. So if it can't be put in a YouTube video, probably shouldn't be put in front of a small child. But anyway, you can all decide for yourselves on that one. But the point is, when a councillor has councillor written all over his Twitter profile and is talking about meetings which he chaired and the people that spoke at those meetings, well, you can understand people thinking that that has something to do with official council business. And then lumping everybody that attended said meeting into lots of frankly hateful comments doesn't seem appropriate to us. So we thought, well, we'll leave it to the council because they won't want this either. They'll take care of it. So did they? In a word, no. No, they let him get away with it. They decided it was his personal opinion. Let's dig out that email, shall we? Following my conversations with Councillor Scordis, I note he has deleted the original tweet, and on that basis, both myself and the Council's independent person are of the view this matter did not merit any further actions, as these allegations were not likely to be found to be a breach of the Code of Conduct. Really? So the legal advice I had was derogatory statements made by a councillor on their personal social media accounts can be deemed to have breached the Code of Conduct if they are considered to be offensive, discriminatory or unprofessional. Yet Mr. Weavers and his independent person, so an independent person is just someone that works at another council. I would have thought an independent person would be someone that doesn't work for any council, but apparently just borrowing someone from somewhere else is deemed independent. About as independent as a buffalo's butt cheeks. Anyway, moving on. And just at the point you thought Councillor Scordis couldn't possibly stoop any lower, he does this tweet and he pays to promote it. I never did get to the bottom of whether he paid with taxpayer money to promote this delightful little tweet. A reminder that these idiots do not represent ordinary people. Don't think that's the end of it. It's not. He's not done. And then the icing on the cake was getting into a spat with the pop group Right Said Fred. So this is clearly a perfectly acceptable way for councillors to behave. So basically, councillors, don't worry about the Code of Conduct. Say whatever you like. Well, there is an exception to the rule. You can only say whatever you like to a certain group of people. Now, those people must be people that haven't changed their identity in any way, shape or form, i.e. they are the form in which they were born. If they identify as something else, don't do it, don't go there. If they have any unusual fetishes, don't go there. In fact, embrace and endorse them as much as you can. So had I known this at the time, I could have identified as a cat when I started asking about bicycle lanes. Then I'm sure Councillor Scordis would have been out on his ear. So it is entirely possible that the reason Councillor Scordis wasn't thoroughly investigated was because the council were dealing with another very serious matter that took them 6 months to have investigated. Now, considering the libellous comments that were fully supported by Colchester Council about us, you might wonder what on earth was said to make them investigate another councillor for 6 whole months. Let me show you what Councillor Patricia Moore wrote in Mersey Life magazine on July 2022. Councillor Moore commented on how much councillors are at each other's before elections and then all friends afterwards. And then she wrote the fateful comment, "Elect Muppets, get a comedy show." So this really upset Councillor Chris Wood. Councillor Wood thought this was disrespectful and bring the whole council into disrepute. Oh, sorry, wrong photo. Yes, Councillor Wood thought this would bring the whole council into disrepute. So he put in a complaint. Although he's not actually a Colchester councillor, so it wasn't written about him, it was written about other councillors. Anyway, so Councillor Moore, after the complaint, was advised to put things right in the next edition of Mersey Life magazine, which she did. Unfortunately, that upset the complainant, Councillor Chris Wood, once again. Now, at this point, she didn't know who had put in the complaint against her because it was anonymous. So she wrote, "Some tender-hearted soul has made a formal complaint that I have been less than generous to my fellows and that my sense of humour was unkind. I reserve the right to have an opinion and shed light on some of the murkier goings-on." But in so doing, she managed to upset Councillor Woods, butterfingers, even more. So he put in a third complaint about the language used in that article. He did not like being called a tender-hearted soul. Who would want to be called such a thing? Then Councillor Moore did something even worse. When she found out who the complainant was, she publicly challenged him over it. The poor man felt intimidated by the 76-year-old Councillor Moore. So because of the intimidation by this 76-year-old woman, he put in another complaint to the council, which is brave of him and has done a great service for men who are easily intimidated by 76-year-old women everywhere. It's a difficult subject to speak up about. Most men would be far too embarrassed to say that a 76-year-old woman had intimidated them publicly. So well done, Councillor, for finding the courage to admit that you felt intimidated by a 76-year-old woman.
I'm also worried about the electric batteries on the anything. These batteries are made at terrible human cost.
I've slightly lost track of the number of complaints now, but I think another one was put in because she not only intimidated him in public, but she outed him. So I'm not sure whether that was part of the same complaint about the intimidation. So although I've lost count of which complaint we're on now, thankfully the council spent a lot of time and money investigating her for 6 months. So they've got a whole report, which sadly I can't read you out because it's confidential, even though they put it on their website. Councillor Chris Wood wanted a full apology for the article that was written that wasn't about him. Dear Councillor Chris Wood, is there anything else the tax-paying public could do to make you feel better? Perhaps we could send you on an all-expenses-paid trip to the Bahamas so you can overcome the trauma that this intimidating 76-year-old woman has inflicted upon you and your family in an article that wasn't about you. So if there's anything else we can do to help you overcome this, do please let us know, because I don't think we spent nearly enough money on this incident. So a little bit of difference between how Councillor Moore was treated and how Councillor Lee Scordis was treated. So if you're wondering why I didn't sue him for libel, I actually very nearly did. I came very close. I was going to go with Heather Mills's lawyers because they do a no-win, no-fee for libel. The only thing that stopped me is I wasn't sure if Councillor Scordis was married and had kids, and I knew if we sent in a really good law team, they'd wipe him out. So I decided against it just in case he had family. The other thing is, did I want to put the time and energy into it? The main reason we spoke out about the council was because of the child slave labour in the Congo and all the environmental damage that is being done. And when it came down to it, that was far more important for me to put my time and energy into rather than dealing with Councillor Scordis. But did that complaint change him in any way? Let's have a look at his Twitter profile, shall we? Let's see if he's changed at all. Well, looky. Here's Councillor Scordis again at a Colchester cabinet meeting where a conspiracy theorist is spreading nonsense about 5G. However, more worrying is that a group calling themselves the Essex Residents Association, I'm hoping people won't be drawn into this. It's a slight improvement, conspiracy theorist as opposed to conspiracy crank, but it's still not a nice terminology, although admittedly I did see some of that meeting that he's referring to, and the gentleman in question didn't do himself any favours with all of the things he put together with 5G. But that aside, members of the public should not be referred to like this. Full credit to Councillor Luxford Vaughan for one, having researched it herself, and two, having been able to see beyond the conspiracy sounding stuff, if only all councillors were as knowledgeable and respectful. But sadly no. So Councillor Scordis doesn't seem to have learned his lesson because there wasn't one. He knew full well he would get away with that. Well, I assume he did, because surely no one could be that stupid to be hurling insults at the general public for 4 days. But what the most concerning part of all of this is the effect it's having on the wider general public. Certainly in the comments that we see under the videos, people are sick to death of what they see as a lack of respect from councillors towards the general public. They've had enough. The number one thing that he said over and over is vote them out. Vote them out. Get rid of the lot of them. So when they see things like this, they lump everybody in together, so you are all being tarred with the same brush. I suggest you have a little chat with him because he's making you all look bad. And you've really shot yourself in the foot by ejecting that gentleman from the meeting, or trying to. Now, as far as I know, nobody locally knew who he was, but that doesn't matter. You've shown the general public you do not tolerate the general public. So that was one. Then most of you were on your mobile phones while the public were having their say, which is incredibly disrespectful, and it's clear that you are not listening to what we are saying when you are going through your paperwork on your laptop or on your phone. It is clear you are not listening. So instead of the general public being outraged by the child slave labour, they are outraged that you lot are on your mobile phone. And now the comments about this local man, yes, he may have well said some things that sounded like a conspiracy theory, but to be doing this in public on social media, it is thoroughly disrespectful. If you keep shooting yourself in the foot like this, you are not going to get any respect at all from the local people. And that is unfortunate, because if there's no respect, we can't have a relationship. And we need to have a good working relationship between the public and the council. So I do hope, Councillor Pearson and all the other councillors, that you can have a word with your colleagues and really get the message out there that behaviour does need to change. And if anyone would like a Screaming Muppet t-shirt, they are available on Etsy.